Hey, this is Jay Weinberg, and you're listening to Heavy Mental Breakdown.
Mr. Weinberg, I know I've already said this, but dude, thank you so much for being on here. Drumming was
My
always
pleasure.
drumming was my kind of introduction to metal. I remember the first
Cool.
time, and I know we have a lot of mutual respect for him. Joey Jordison grew up listening to those drummers, and I always wanted to be one myself. But my parents didn't want to buy me a drum set, and
Sure.
my dad said, "Hey, I will take you to Guitar Center right now and buy you a guitar if you stop doing this. If you just drop this drum thing." And as a teenager, I was like, I would
Gotta
love a
keep it down
guitar.
too much of a racket.
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah,
man. Well, that's understandable. It's not for how do I say this? I mean, it's great. It's great that your family's, supportive of any kind of musical endeavor, but
right.
drums, man, yeah, that's another level of involvement and commitment on everybody's part,
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
I was gonna say my dad gave me that option, but I don't. I think your dad was pretty cool about you being a drummer.
Yeah, well, I think his coolest, his coolest aspect of that was like being very hands off, which was very freeing in a lot of ways,
Sure.
like wanting me to discover the instrument similar to how he discovered the instrument. He had his favorite drummers growing up. We're very, very different drummers, he and I,
Right, right, right.
although we relate in the most, the most crucial ways, as drummers were pretty different.
Yeah.
But I think that was because, he let me find out the kind of music that I liked, the things that I gravitated towards, that style of rock and roll, whatever kind of branch of it you want to define it as, is different from the rock and roll he grew up with, he and his peers grew up with. But I think the
Mm.
fact that he saw it as a valid art form in itself, um, and understood that it's like, oh, this is my son's on ramp, just like I had my on ramp, and the
Yeah.
fact that he kind of like let me be and let me discover what I wanted to find out of it, because I didn't want to make it like school. I didn't want to like take drum lessons. Really, I never have.
Yeah.
Like institution wise, like my drum lessons are
Sure.
watching other drummers and learning every day. Um,
Yeah.
but the fact that he was like very laissez-faire like that was like, probably the best involvement of having a musician as a parent, was
Yeah.
just like letting me kind of run loose with it myself, which was very gratifying.
Yeah, definitely one of the biggest benefits is something that a lot of people when it comes to touring, having to leave family and being away from parents, being away from siblings, that comes up a lot, being distant from your family, but I bet it made you and your family closer. Would you say or
I think so. I think so. I mean, like when you're a young person and you want to get out there and you want to be creative and you want to see the world, you want to do the things that get you out there, like for myself being a teenager, like all I could dream of was like getting on tour and never being home. Like I've spent so much time, in one place. I just want to like, fuck this place. I just want to get
yeah,
out. I just want to get out and make a whole bunch of noise.
yeah.
Um, that definitely swings back into perspective after, almost 20 years of doing it in a like professional sense of like, most of my time has been spent touring or supporting the endeavors of touring and the whole, all the energy and time that goes into that. But certainly when I was starting out, that was all I wanted to do. I didn't like when I was in the band Against Me, we were away from home for like 9 months out of one of the years I was in the band, and
Yeah.
that was all I wanted. That was like everything to me, was like get me away from my immediate surroundings. I want to
Mm.
be like, personally, I was just like, I want to be anywhere but here. I want to get out and do the thing. And
Yeah.
but you're right
All
in
in.
that.
All in and
Yeah,
no
yeah,
and no backup plan.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you have kind of like a monastic focus on something, it allows you to kind of just like whatever time and energy and love and passion you have for this thing, you'll find you have like endless energy to put into that, or at least you'll stress yourself out to the point of like, you'll find what your limits are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And then you just
but
try
I
to
think,
balance it out.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think you're right in that, it is a balance, like everything, like I think in my younger years, finding that balance of like, I've only known this kind of, life on the East Coast, which was great. Wouldn't trade it for anything. But like, I wanted to get out there and do stuff and play all over. And so the balance of that was to go all the way in. And then as, life changes and evolves and stuff, you find other ways where you have to find that balance. In
Yeah.
your life. So so much of like, I'm sure a lot of what we'll talk about is just, finding balance in all these things, and things that take all of your energy. It's like, well, you gotta leave something for maybe not leave something, but you have other aspects in life that you have to tend to, or else your life kind of does start to feel a little bit unbalanced. And
Yeah.
that's always changing,
Yeah.
so you always got to have kind of like a keep yourself in check with those things. Having a great, support system and family and partner, or whatever it is, that certainly helps, as like, as you grow and as you push this thing further and further, the more complex it gets. It doesn't get any simpler. It gets more and more complex as you go. But, hopefully with time, you kind of pick up the tools with that you can handle those complexities and those challenges and stuff
Yeah.
along the way.
You just have to jump into it, and you don't know how to do it until you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even having
Can't learn
family
that in
members that aren't
school.
musicians, you can't, there's no replica for just, okay, now you got to do it. Now you got to
Yeah.
go out there and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And having that supportive family, I bet that made it a lot easier for you.
I think a
So that's
family that
awesome.
understood that
Right.
a family that understood the meaning of it, like having people that could point to it and be like, I get it. It's not the kind of music I like, but I get it. I get
Yeah.
why you want to do this, why you want to pursue this, and why you want to dedicate all of your time to this. And that was great. And not just family, but like, when I started touring, like as a full-time musician, I was still in school, I was still a teenager.
Mm.
Um, just figuring it out. And luckily I had structure in those places as well. Like my school was like, hey, we understand what it is you want to do. We understand you're not going to stop what you're doing just to be a student. So maybe we can find ways to make this coexist,
That's awesome.
and that's very fortunate. I'm very lucky in that
Yeah.
regard of like having those kinds of structures around me, of people that understood that it was like, I'm heading in this direction, and nothing is going to deter me off of that. And luckily having like-minded people surrounding me in other ways, whether they were involved directly or indirectly, was like, yeah, it was huge.
Yeah, and being able to witness a large scale of touring and being on stage and seeing everything your dad was doing, I bet when you started to do it, you came in with just already all that knowledge and being able to see kind of what goes on behind the scenes, and being able to handle that. You saw that from an early age, and I bet that's helped you tremendously as you've progressed your career.
I think so. I think, growing up, it's like, it's all I knew,
Right.
it was the only
Yeah.
reference point I had, until I would then watch how that translated to like the bands I was discovering and watching them do it and stuff. But it definitely gave me a front row seat to watch like their work ethic,
Right.
and
Yeah.
how meaningful this music was to them, how meaningful it was to people all over the world, and the seriousness with which they like conducted their business and how they went about their business doing what they do. It wasn't with a casual intensity. It was like with a ferocity that you could like feel coming off the stage.
Mm.
And that, energy wise, that was like
Magic.
super infectious and
Yeah.
magical, and like all
Yeah.
those things that it's like, you couldn't help but be overtaken by that, especially as, an
Yeah.
impressionable, I don't know, 9-year-old, 10-year-old person that I was. So having that kind of input to understand that, like, you can make these magical moments. You can make things that are totally larger than life, as a
Yeah.
group, as one component, one person within a group and stuff like that. That was hugely, it doesn't matter the genre or the type of music you're playing or whatever, but like the fact that human beings can make that happen through hard work and diligence and passion and stuff was like,
Yeah.
those were the lessons that I took at an early age for sure.
Yeah. So music is an amazing way for a lot of people to get out a lot of their emotions. Having a bad day, listen to music. Having a good day, listening to music. When it comes to playing things and having sticks in your hands and being able to bang on something, that's a little bit different. Um, has drumming became a therapy for you? And if so, how early did you realize that, hey, I can take this aggression out by just playing music and being and trying to get better and being like my best self? Like when did you realize that there was that connection there?
I think pretty early on, and then when my awareness like kind of became a little bit more acute of that nature of like what it is. It's not it is a unique form of therapy in that it's not, it's not everything, but it certainly is. There's
Right.
value in the therapeutic nature of like, yeah, bashing the hell out of something in a constructive, positive way,
Right. Right.
not, exploding in a negative way. I think there is something about exhausting your energy, especially with this kind of art form, this style of music, that like it takes everything you got, from both your mental and physical energy. It was something I fell in love with at like at the end of practice with my high school bands or a show or whatever. And as I would go on to, play with other folks and stuff, just like it was always, the idea of like leave everything on the stage. I want to come
Yeah.
off that stage with nothing that I could have, nothing that I held back. I want to leave everything out there.
Yeah.
And so when you have this art form that really demands that of you, it's very easy to tap into that and to to give yourself that gift or that that permission to let go of all that is, your frustrations, your anxieties, your depression or whatever, and funnel it into something constructive that you get to look back at and be like, well, at least I did something positive with that.
Absolutely.
um like I said, as you grow and you get older and you kind of blaze further along this path, that becomes more and more complex. And sometimes that thing can even become the frustrating thing of like, at times when you do it so much, when you do it every day of the week, for months on end out of a year or something,
Mm,
it takes on different qualities. It takes on like I'm giving of everything I have to this, yet and I'm exhausted at the end of the physical act of doing this, yet emotionally, I'm like frustrated in the sense of like it's not diminishing returns, if that's a word that I could use, but like ways that, through the repetition of doing it, you're almost kind of like you're in this rehearsed state of execution where like maybe the first night of a tour it's like all out, letting it all out, and you have that, you can sit back with that sigh of relief of like, oh my god, I got so much off my chest. And then
yeah.
it's like, well, you got to do it tomorrow night and the night after that and then 25 more
Sure.
nights
Yeah.
after that. And so
Yeah.
there's a natural aspect of it where you like, you know your emotional well only runs like so deep, and then the things that you're still dealing with as a person, the complexities of life or whatever, it's hard to get that out when you're in this like, yes, a creative flow, but like, you're pummeling it and yourself so hard that you can only squeeze that,
Yeah.
the juice out
That's a
of that
good
for
point. I
like so
never
much
really thought
time.
about it in that way. When you do something repeatedly over and over and over again, it does kind of start to, if you don't step away from it, it kind of does start to have that. Well, it's kind of maybe doing the opposite because then now you're feeling a little sore, a week into it. Or does any of that also
Yeah.
play? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, your body fatigues over time. If you're committing, 100% of yourself, like the music that I've played for, near 20 years, and other people certainly for longer and whatever, it does demand that of you. That it, like, everybody has that, it encounters some fatigue on that level.
Yeah.
And when there are expectations, like, they have a new album, and you gotta bring that music to all these corners of the world and
Yeah, yeah,
places. Like,
yeah.
there's expectation, and you gotta rise up to that.
Yeah.
You can you when you start to, when I first started, like, touring, and touring a lot, it definitely gave me a sense of, like, oh, you can understand what that burnout that some people experience really is like, and
Right.
how, if you're not careful about how you conduct yourself and keep your eye on the ball, and try to be motivated for the right reasons, like, you can get swept up into a whole bunch of stuff that's hard to pull yourself out of. Some people,
Yeah.
the act of touring makes them more depressed. It puts more on your shoulders, and the expectation
Yeah.
of being a performer and this and that. Like, it comes up in ways that you didn't anticipate when you were 14 years old, wanting to be a rocker out there making a whole bunch of noise with your friends. You all of a sudden realize, it's like, wow, when once you peek behind the curtain, and you're like, wow, this is a lot more complex than I had originally anticipated, and it takes so much. And that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It's my favorite thing I do. That's where I feel the most alive. It's where I feel the most connected to my instrument, to myself, to the my collaborators, the people who were all working together to make a thing that none of us could achieve on our own. That's, like, hugely important in life,
Yeah.
and to find that, and nurture that is very important. um but but it is like I'm saying, like, that balance thing of finding, you know when other aspects of life, or complexities, or what have you, come into your experience. It can make your focus, like, it can
Mm.
pull at your focus in
Okay.
ways that you didn't anticipate. And so I think, the exercise of doing it, and doing it a lot, and doing it repeatedly, and not having much time to recuperate between acts of doing it, is like, you have to learn how to calibrate that for yourself. And that's something that, like, you only get attuned to once you're doing it.
Right. Yeah.
But that's, like, hugely significantly important.
So what do you do when you're on the road to kind of, step when you need that kind of relaxer, or some meditation or something? Like, what do you do when you're on the road and you have to be giving it 100%? Do you do anything between shows, or do you kind of wait until you get back home and do all the things then?
It's tough. It's different. It's different for every scenario.
Sure, sure.
I think, like, always just kind of, like, listening to your body, listening to your mind, of, like, what you might need on any certain day. If it's been a long slog of a bunch of shows that have been incredibly, physically and mentally, demanding, I might need to just shut the fuck up, and just stay quiet and still for, like, a day, and
Mhm.
yeah, and not do much of
Yeah.
anything. um part
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about being a touring musician is traveling and seeing other cultures and stuff, and there
Yeah.
is a lot of good for the soul that does too.
Absolutely.
Experiencing things that you wouldn't be able to experience if it weren't for the amazing fortune that live musicians have, of, like, you get on a magic carpet and you end up in these different cities all over. It's like,
Yeah.
we're so lucky in that respect. I've never been comfortable being someone who just, like, sits in a hotel room and refreshes the internet until it's, like, time to go to bed. It's
Yeah.
never been how I've liked to do things. So I like to, pop in my headphones and go walking around a town, or something. Experience art and culture and landmarks if I can. That's always nice. Sometimes that's alone, or sometimes maybe that's with a friend that's on the tour or something like that, a bandmate. Like you try to just give yourself those moments of like of recharging. Like I just know, I think I've just like kind of learned about myself over the years of like, I need to give my body what it needs, because my main focus is like a day from now when I need to be back at 100%, recharged, and let my battery kind of do its thing, to get to where I'm going to be happy with tomorrow's performance and the day after that, or whatever. Um, it's always just kind of calibrating where you're at,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think there are a lot of things, a lot of aspects about being a traveling touring person that can fill your cup, besides the hour or hour and a half or 2 hours you get on stage. Like that's a lot of time that you need to fill with like living your life and doing
Hmm.
something positive with your time. And that's not
Yeah.
just, a lot of that is preparation. My show days are pretty much completely just centered around the performance and the responsibilities about what go into that. Like just making sure I'm not hitting the stage tired or
Hmm.
dehydrated, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like I want to do the thing that I'm there to do to the best of my ability. So I just try to take care of myself the best I can. Because traveling and exerting that much energy night after night is like, it naturally will wear you down. So you gotta put up your defenses, um to keep that from happening. It gets crazy like when you have the experience of touring, in a post-COVID era, like that threw a whole different kind of monkey wrench into the
Yeah.
aspect of like
Yeah,
the
it did.
mental grind. I mean, think about it, like the mental
Yeah.
grind of being a touring musician, and when you usually have your habits of like, oh, I'm in Seattle with a day off. I want to go to a bookstore and I want to, go to this and that or whatever, any place you might be. You
Yeah.
then have to calibrate like, especially someone in like, in my position as like, you know, being the one drummer. It's like if you can't make the show because you got COVID or something, like we're fucked,
Yeah.
and that's a whole discussion, and so like
Yeah.
taking that incredibly
Yeah.
seriously when, coming back to touring in like what, the fall of 2021, like I had
Yeah.
to just stay in my room, and like that is kind of like a mental grind in and of itself. um so I had to find ways to occupy myself, and be, I try to be as creative as I can, and whether that's being like a visual artist and trying to work on things, or excuse me, doing things that are like sharing what I'm doing on tour and making drum cam videos and all that stuff, and building out my website and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just finding ways of being productive and not going crazy, and
I've
being
watched a lot of
responsible,
those, by the
and
way.
like,
Those drum videos you have on your I've seen a bunch of them. It's so fun to
well, there
watch
you go.
it,
So
man.
then my time was well spent. If
Absolutely.
well, so then that's that was because I was, I had to lock myself in my room on tour and just, like, what am I going to do
Yeah.
with my time?
Yeah. But
Um,
now you have all this great
well,
content too, though.
there you go. All right.
Yeah.
It was worth something.
So one topic that I think would be a really great topic to hear your perspective of, not too long ago, you made a separation from Slipknot. That was a little unexpected, and I wanted to ask you about your mental health after that situation happened. You've been in the industry for so long, and a lot of things have, gone great and, not so great. But, was this one a little bit more of a mental health challenge for you than maybe some of the other things that have happened in your career?
To peel that back even a little bit more and give a little bit more context.
Yeah.
So in the summer of 2018, I had discovered an injury that I had in my left hip that I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what my problem was with my hip, but like my favorite form of exercising, especially on tour, we're talking about, things we do on tour to keep occupied and do positive things. My favorite way of exercising on tour would just be to go running. I can run an
Mm,
hour outside the back of the venue, an hour back or something like that, run
cool.
on a day
Yeah.
off. It's very easy to do. I don't need to have much other than some sneakers and my headphones.
Mhm.
But so in the summer of 2018, I'd go for a run for like 5 minutes and I would discover that like I couldn't walk after like 5 minutes. My left
Mm.
side, my left hip would seize up and I couldn't like it was like really, really a lot too much pain to even walk. And I was like, what is
Oh,
going
wow.
on with my hip? And so I would baby it. I would, I didn't want it to affect my drumming. So I like kind of put activities that put a strain on my hip at a pause, so like I wouldn't run as much as I would. And I would kind of just like protect it and try to not do anything. And then, a couple months later, I'd try it again. And I'm like, I'm still having the same problem. So then when everything kind of shuts down around 2020, um, I went and got an MRI and the doctor showed me what I needed what I had going on. It turns out I had excess bone on the side of my femur that had actually torn the labrum of my left hip, and that was
Mm.
causing the inflammation and pain. And that it's common among like athletes, especially athletes that have like a lot of wear and tear on their hips, hockey
Mm.
players and such, goalies especially, a lot of
Mm,
up
yeah.
down motion and that kind of wear and tear on your hip will do it.
Yeah.
So I went to a guy who's done this exact operation on like multiple active NHL players, and he's like, "Look, you should get. My advice would be you get this operation done. Get it done while you're younger, as opposed to when you're older, because you'll bounce back quicker. And the healing time is between 5 and 7 months. So about 6 months, which like I've had minor surgeries, like super minor things that didn't have me laid up, for more than like a week or two, but nothing that was going to have me laid up for multiple months where I'd have to relearn how
Mm.
to walk and all this. And like, I knew the stakes of you know, what was going to happen surrounding that. So, already kind of like having to grapple with that of understanding that to take care of my health, I'll have to make this decision to have this operation done, and knowing that that's going to like implement a really gnarly grind that I've never experienced before of recovery, and to do it right, to get through and recover in a healthy way and repair my hip. It was going to take a lot of like focus and drive and determination and
Mm.
pushing through like these things we're talking about, the mental grind and physical grind of like, I don't know, anything that we pursue in life. But like, this was going to be a big one. I knew that.
Yeah.
Um, but in 2020, there are other things at play of like, well, there's a recording schedule that can't get interrupted. There's a touring schedule that's coming up that can't get interrupted. And so, I kind of have to push this thing a year, 2 years, 3 years. And so that and all the while it's still, my hip is in a state of disrepair where it's like, it functions and I can play drums, I can walk and stuff, but it's still restrictive in like other aspects of my life. And so it's like, okay, just kind of waiting for the opportunity when, some major activity can just like take a pause for a little while and I can go do this thing and take care of it. Um, so I found a window of opportunity between late 2023 and mid 2024. That was about 6 months of like, this could give me the time to do this and get through the recovery and get on the other side, get right back to business. Um, and so in conversations with my coworkers and stuff, we kind of made the decision of like I don't want to wait anymore. I want to get this thing done while I'm still at the time 33 years old, and
Mm.
I thought that would give me the best chance of like having a full recovery, having it go smoothly and as quickly as possible. um and so I would basically like right after our last shows of 2023, I'd get this operation done, and I'd actually developed some things in the interim to like remain creative. Like I built this sound library, this virtual drum set with a company called Mixwave, where I have like all my drum sounds, so I can be like writing in a creative way using a computer and not actually like playing the drums, but I can still kind of have my sounds, have access to my sounds, and if we're in a creative mode, we can lean into that. Um, so yeah, so then uh, to get the phone call that I did, informing me about what I was informed about, a couple days before or a week before, or whatever it was, before I had this operation, when I was scheduled to have this operation, that was a gnarly headspace to be in for sure. Without getting too much into that, but especially with then the knowledge of like, well, a week from now, I'm going to be undergoing a procedure that's going to have me on the couch for at least a month and a half. Ended up being like, a month and a half or 2 months where I just I can't walk. I can't do anything. I just have to be motionless relatively and endure recovery. And so when circumstances align where where that's taking place, like, yeah, that was an incredibly difficult mental grind, especially as unexpected as things were. But what's the alternative? You gotta push through that. So sure, but like I said, having a support system of like, you really learn who your actual friends are, and who your partner is, who you're going through life with.
Yeah,
really is. And so when you have those challenging moments, so by no means an individual effort, that's for sure. But I felt like that was also, I think my mentality surrounding that, certainly as difficult and unexpected as it was, my mentality was to set goals in front of myself that, that this wasn't going to deter me off of like a greater or larger path of like being a creative person and being a musician, being a drummer. A circumstance that I've seen it really rock other people, and to understand that, in order to maintain my focus on, still being a creative person and enjoying, trying to enjoy that, difficult when you can't even move. But as I committed to my physical training and my physical rehabilitation, it felt very like, I don't know, like Karate Kid or something like that. A very like, you are stripped down, like, so to your very core and your basic entity as a person, and that you got to just rebuild, your mind, your body, your soul.
That's such a great way of looking at all this.
Well, it's not, and that's not to say that it's easy, it's
right. Oh yeah, no, not at all.
But to have great people around me, not to mention, in that grind, discovering that it's like, I can't find the answers to, things that like I just can't find the answers to, when things are so confusing and dark and like, and
no closure,
whatever
really.
you want to ascribe to that. Yeah, sure. So understanding, and at that point, throughout my life, I had therapists here and there. Nothing that was like a match made in heaven. Nothing that felt like I liked the process of like trying to better my mental health and trying to take an active role in like combating, the darkness or the, whatever it is that we all battle with every day. Right. And some days are better than others, some days are worse than others. Um, but I think, uh, but I reached a point where I was just like, speaking to other people who were like, advocates, or at least have their own practices of really diving deep into their mental health and examining, events in your life that really shake things up. That, like, how do you get through those? How do you not let that stop you? How do you not let that be such an obstacle? Or if it is an obstacle, how do you know, get around it or bust right through it, or whatever, and sometimes we don't have all the answers ourselves, and we need to reach out and through communication and stuff. So
Yeah.
I was super fortunate. Maybe a couple months after that, I was very fortunate to be introduced to a therapist who I've now been seeing for 2 years, over 2 years now.
It just takes the right one.
It does. It does. And it's like, it's not, the discovery is like, it's difficult because most times it's like, or, sometimes or most times it's not a match made in heaven. And it's
Yeah.
not, you don't feel that thing of like that flow of, if like, I wound up discussing it as like, I feel like I'm this like tightly wound ball of barbed wire that like I'm starting to, kind of like, unravel and stuff. And to have someone who is a helpful person to have a conversation with, of like experiences and life things, and that,
Yeah.
it grows, that becomes other things. It's not just about one situation, but it's about many situations. um and it's not every day, but it's like, sometimes there are those moments where it's like that really helped me.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
helped me regain, clarity about, like, even if I don't have clarity about an aspect of my life, I can still maintain happiness and get to a thing and focus on a thing that I really like doing, and that
Yeah.
I can gravitate towards that. I can emanate from a dark period and into a light period. And I think that in tandem with, like, finding or searching for a gravitational pull to, like, to positive people, and for myself it was like, I want to get right back up and do the thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Once I teach myself how to walk again,
Yeah.
I lost an incredible amount of mass in my left leg, and I had to like rebuild that, for sure. But just like, okay, my friends in Suicidal Tendencies, they need a drummer. Absolutely, I want to do that and reinforce, these iconic anthems that I've always enjoyed. You Can't Bring Me Down, War Inside My Head, all these things, they're fucking with me subliminally, all these things that, like, I enjoyed as a listener. But when Mike Muir comes calling of like, I need a drummer and I want it to be you, I receive that as like, those are the messages I need to be internalizing and reinforcing within myself, and opening a show with You Can't Bring Me Down after having gone through that
Yeah.
certainly was like that's therapeutic, and I think,
There was that closure too, a little bit. You're like, all right, that's done. I've been able to move on.
yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word closure, but
Yeah.
you're further along the path.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
felt I felt
Yeah.
for I felt further along, and moving forward. Like, I think a lot of the creative experience is so much of, you know no matter, to me, I just really like forward motion, how uh no matter how big or small that forward motion is, as long as I'm like a part of something that I believe in, or
Mm.
if it's not being a part, if I'm doing something myself that I can believe in, that feels like it's part of moving my life forward. And it's difficult to do when you can't move, and
Yeah.
you're just like recovering in this way. But taking notice of like those mental health things, being aware of like this takes tending to, I've tended to the responsibilities of, being a performer, performing with lots of uh you know how do I put this, with performing up to expectations of those around me, and living up to what it is that I've taken on with like seriousness and a responsibility. Like I said, watching serious musicians at a young age taught me that it's like this is no trivial thing. This is like a sacred thing that
Hmm.
not everybody gets to do. And so, when
Right.
you get to do this, you got to give it your all. So tending to that in a ferocious way, and it kind of takes up your entire dashboard, is like a huge endeavor. And then so when you're kind of like spit back out on the other side of that, you kind of realize like, you know, there are other aspects of life that require some tending to, and
Sure.
maybe because of my focus thing, because of singular focus on one thing, you start to like, coming up for air after 10 years, you kind of have an awareness of like, wow, there are beautiful things that are, that I didn't have my eyes open to, that I need to
Mm.
tend to. And so that occurs over time, the
Yeah.
awareness of like, um I think that kind of like I felt like kind of a lightness come back to myself that I hadn't felt
Mm.
in a long time.
That's
um
great.
and that was really enjoyable, and
Yeah.
continues to be. And other aspects of life, like I'm becoming a father, and all
Yeah.
that, like that, you know it really does kind of shift your perspective. And
Absolutely.
not like it really changes anything from the path of being a creative person, but um I think in doing the work of like, battling through a gnarly mental and physical grind, um uh recovering on the other side of that with positivity, and going on tour with Metallica for a year doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't.
And being
Yeah.
surrounded by beautiful people like that,
Yeah.
really gave me a renewed sense of like this music community and the
Mm.
beautiful people that are within
Yeah.
it. That's a
Yeah.
really great thing. So
Yeah,
I've
as
enjoyed those aspects.
unfortunate as that was, it seemed like some really great things kind of did come out of that. Like for me, I went through the hardest time of my life, and then once I kind of started to rebuild my mental health, I'm like, oh man, there is so much out there. But like what you said, when you're in it, it's so hard to just kind of turn it off. Like you have to kind of write it out a little bit sometimes.
It's all great things, man. It's all great things.
Yeah. All right. Well, like you had said a little while ago, you have a daughter on the way. So first off,
Hmm.
congratulations. That is amazing. One thing that you and I somewhat connected on early is that I just found out that I am having. I don't know if I told you this, but I'm having a daughter as well. We just found out like two
Congratulations.
days ago.
All right.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Um, so I love that you said that, some of these big life changes can kind of open your eyes a little bit and different perspectives and, knowing this one life for 20 years and now you're stepping into a brand new life, like things are going to change dramatically. And so how are you kind of viewing that right now with, doing really well with music and touring, but balancing out and being there for your wife and prepping for, the child? And what is that music child preparation balance like for you?
Yeah, again, more balance. It's great also having like a community of like rocker dads who I've been able to speak with about like, how have you guys
It's
done it? And
true.
I have friends who
Yeah.
have kids who are teenagers now, and so the fact that I have people in my life like that is like, I feel like there are aspects of my creative life that have led me to being able to take this on, because I have, fostered friendships with people who share that, that path. And I can see the proof in the pudding of like people who remain creatively active and very creatively active and busy and making beautiful things, continuing to make beautiful things, but also shifting to where your primary responsibility is to your new child, so like that's a huge thing. And so yeah, once I found out that we were expecting our child, I wanted to take kind of like a conscious moment and really just like reset, and shift. I know your priorities just kind of naturally shift.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of preparation, honestly, like around our physical space. We had to change like a lot of things in our house. My jam room, as it was, where I've had my drums set up forever. It's the only space that we had that can be, our daughter's nursery. So it's like, okay, so get my drums out of there. Let's get a crib in there and do the whole thing. And okay, now I gotta, I've been talking about building a studio in our backyard for like 6 7 years, and so now actually getting to do that, and how that's been a huge effort, just to have like a living space where I can also be creative and not making a whole bunch of noise because I don't want to disturb our daughter. So that's been
Yeah.
awesome, but definitely taken a
The
lot of
feng
time and
shui is
energy
off
and
a little bit.
focus. Yeah, but better, it's better. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but so I really wanted to take the time to focus on like creating a space, nesting as they call it, and you're probably going through a lot of the same thing of like how do I best prepare myself for this change and create the best environment for my child who doesn't give a fuck about the music I make or the art I make or whatever like that, maybe one day,
Yeah.
but for the time being, it's like it's my wife and myself and her. And so
Yeah. Amazing.
that's huge. And I just kind of like, it's really like, for a first sense of like true responsibility. Like I think, I've sensed responsibility in that. Like I've had dogs for years, but
Yeah.
like that's a different responsibility than a child. And so having an awareness of that, I want to best prepare for that. And so um I've been more of a studio rat than anything. I kind of have come off the road and my buddies in Suicidal Tendencies are doing their thing, which is amazing. But it was like a conscious thing that I wanted to take this time, at least, until I get my bearings as a father, to really just like slow down for the first time in 20 years,
Yeah.
and it's nuts because it's like at the beginning of this year, I've been off the road like what 2 months or something like that, and I'm already like going stir crazy, like what do I do with myself? I'm a touring person. Like what do I do? But I'm focused on all this other stuff. So I just kind of get used to that like grind of things of like, what do I do with my hands? What do I do with
Yeah.
myself? But so luckily I've channeled that into other things, some things that are actually coming out like right now. Like I just released a song with a band called Fuming. We made a record together that I'm really excited about, so that's starting to make its way into the world. That's cool.
Cool.
I have a bunch of other projects. Like in the month of January, I made 5 records in that month alone.
Wow.
um, so I like kind of being active in a way where like, you exert a lot of creative energy, and then the months that follow, like I've been, headlong into mixing land of like listening to mixes constantly and getting things ready. Fuming Mouth was a part of that for sure. So I'm currently in that sort of phase with some other things that are really, really exciting. Um, and then I'll be playing some dates with Fuming Mouth later this year as I kind of like take my baby steps into like, I feel like to allow myself to be the best version of myself and the best version of myself that I can be for my family. um I need to find that balance of like, yes, being here and being present and engaged, but also like we're talking about, like having that outlet to expend everything and
Yeah.
to give everything. Um, so then I can, you know, free my mind of the frustrations and challenges of life, and come back, you know, with a better, hopefully, a better sense of having the ability to get out there and make some positive sound is really, you know, it does the soul good. So I know I need that, you know.
Yeah.
But that takes different forms, and so I'm getting out there in like baby step capacity, and you know, a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there,
Yeah.
figuring it out, because I'm about to experience something I've never experienced before, and I want to do it well, so
Yeah.
I got
Good
to
for you,
focus
man.
on
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah.
Much like, yeah, much like other creative, you know, responsibilities have taken a monastic focus, this also has to take a monastic focus, and I
Yeah.
understand that, and I welcome it. I'm excited for it. um and yeah, and I think, you know, the things that keep you on your toes as a person, I think if you let it um lift the other aspects of your life, I think it can, you know, it can feed those other things. I think like being a musician, I've always admired when people have like a variety of projects that give voice to their creative, or that give forums for each of their creative voices. You know, if my creative voice with this project doesn't necessarily fit this project, like that's okay. They can all
Hmm.
feed into one another, and I think all life experiences can do that too. You know, I think I'd be a fool to think that, you know, my travels don't influence, you know, my the music that I am interested in making, and the music I make, you know, has to influence the visual art that I make in some capacity. And so I think if you can harness all those things in a positive way, like you can really have it all, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a great way of looking at
with
it.
yeah, and you know, I'm really fortunate. You know, my wife is an artist as well, so
Oh, cool.
um, having a creative mind that like we look at challenges creatively together. We look at
Yeah.
things as a unit, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, you know, that allows me to see all these things of like, you know, I don't have to sell out and stop being a musician just because my life is changing in this way. I can do it, and so I'm very, very excited about that. I'm super excited to welcome this change at a point in my life where I feel it is a lot lighter than, you know, at least my life just feels lighter around me. My environment feels lighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Same.
enjoy that. Yeah, and I think it's like, you know, prior to that, it's like, you know, I wouldn't want to like bring a person into a world that like that felt that, you know, um I don't know, certain ways that just aren't good. And so
Yeah.
so to now be embarking on this is like super exciting, feels like the right time, and yeah, but
Yeah.
it does inform like all aspects of life. Sure.
I think you and I are about the same age. I'm 1990. Are you?
Yeah, I'm 90.
Oh, you're 90 as well. Yeah. Yeah. So we're having. Look at
Yeah,
us. Look at us. Two millennials having
that's good.
having it at the same time.
Yeah, man.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that's what
I
happened.
have one last question for you. Um,
Sure.
you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about your mental health. I want to step away from your mental health for a second, and kind of talk about the fan side of it. So, I'm going to tell you a quick story of mine, and then I'll ask you your question. So,
Sure.
about 4 years ago, I attempted suicide, and when I got out of the hospital, the first thing that I did was put music on. And I just like I have a playlist of like just my favorite songs. Uh and I pressed play on that shuffle and I got lost in it. I'm like, this, it was at that moment when I was in my darkest time where I'm like, this is the power of music right here. Like this is what I ran to afterwards. And I literally know that music saved my life. It brought me from depression to, hey, I might be able to do this, to I got this. And a lot of that was responsibility. I was all by myself alone. And all I had was my music. And whenever I can thank artists for that, I do. And, you're definitely one that I listen to a lot. And whenever I get, other artists, not specifically here on this podcast, but just if I ever get to meet them, I tell them thank you. And I'm sure you hear that often. I'm sure being in music for the longevity that you have and being a part of so many great projects. I'm sure you've witnessed a little bit of that, of fans and what your music means to them. What is a little bit of your experience just with that side of things?
Yeah, well, first I'm glad you're with us, and
Thank you.
I'm glad that you have that. I have that as well. Like music, absolutely, music has saved my life. It's an incredible, it's a incredible in the ways it's so multifaceted that it serves purposes in our life and finds us when we need it, hopefully, you know.
Yeah.
Uh um Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because um as a performer, as an artist and stuff, it's like I think the thing that we're all getting out there is that like we're not the most well-adjusted people to life, like we put our frustrations and our complex relationships to our experiences and our lives into this music, and we give it our all. That doesn't mean that we are then providing the answers, but I think in the communal aspect of we're one drop in this bucket that we're all a part of, where together we are searching for the answer for that escapes us at times, but we're able to hopefully take something from this, and glean something positive from those experiences and the frustrations and things that whatever, we channel all energy, negative, positive, neutral, into music to hopefully make something that is a worthwhile use of our time. And I think it's such a worthwhile use of our time if that results in a piece of art that then connects with somebody, that it makes them feel any myriad of the positive associations we can have with music, feeling not
Yeah.
so alone,
Hmm.
resonating with the message of a song, resonating with the melody that lifts your mood in a certain way, or a percussive element that lifts your mood, or gives you energy or something like that. There are infinite ways that music speaks to us like that. So I draw from music like that, just in the same way that you have. Um, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this feel the same way.
Yeah.
I've always approached being a creative person, um, or I try to approach it from that like fan first sort of perspective.
Mm.
Not in the sense of like, I want to create something that I think a fan of this would enjoy, but more so in the sense of I want to deliver to this thing that I'm a part of, a collective creating, that merits the that merits somebody investing their time in listening to this and trying to glean something from it. Uh,
Yeah.
and so, as a fan first, it's like having that approach. I think that's always been kind of my motivation for going for it 100%, as much as I can, all the time,
Hmm.
and really trying to make something meaningful there. Because I think the art and music that speaks to me the most is that which I can listen to and hear the heartfelt connection that the artist has to this thing that they've
Yeah.
created.
Hmm.
um because then that makes me feel like, when you feel that, when you feel like, there's plenty of music out there that you can listen to and there's no heart in it. Like, and I've never enjoyed that kind of art, or whatever. I've always gravitated towards the music that you can really hear somebody's soul,
Yeah.
exposed back to you. And
Yeah. Me too.
that's not the easiest thing to do. You could approach things with like all the best intentions of revealing, like bearing your soul in your art and your music. Um, but sometimes it just like doesn't get there or doesn't connect with others, and whatever. That's not the reason for making it.
Hmm.
Um, but I think through the practice of doing it and keeping doing it, you can, you know, you can really find that magic moment where you can listen back to a thing that you've created and be like, there's something real in that.
Hmm.
Anything that I've ever been a part of, that I can listen back and hear that there's something real in that. And it's not everything, it's not every song, it's not every album. But there are moments when you really hit on something that feels real. I think those are the things that other people also tune into and can notice. They can recognize that's real,
Absolutely,
you
they
know?
can. Yeah.
Um, and so that's always been, and that extends to the live performance as well. You can tell when somebody's heart is in it and when somebody's heart is not in it. And so it's
Yeah.
always been like really crucial to me to always, approach things from with the most heart, possible. Um,
Yeah.
because then it does reach that, like, that responsibility that I think, the artist has of like telling the truth, and
Hmm.
as a drummer
Yeah.
you can speak so much truth through, your through hitting pots and pans. But I think there's a realness and a rawness and a a ferocity that you can get there, and have it connect in ways.
Totally.
So I absolutely, I feel like I spend most of my time as like a fan, and trying to glean can, because music still helps me in all those ways.
Yeah.
I found it a good exercise for myself. I try to discover as much like new music as possible, that there's an infinite sea of music out there to pull from. But I try to just seek out as much of it as I can that like makes me feel inspired about what, like, oh, this guy or this girl made this song a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, and this is what we're experiencing. Our world is, it becomes infinitely more complex like every day, and being a human being in 2026 is like, there's a lot to speak to the human condition, and
Yeah.
our personal experiences within it.
Yeah.
um so
Rock and roll's getting me
like you're
through it,
like you're
just
saying,
like many others.
yeah, yeah. And so I think I'm very inspired by and lifted by artists that I can tell are putting their soul into what they do. It motivates me to, put as much as I can into the things that I'm making. And that's always been my favorite aspect about being a creative person. Um, Now more than ever, I feel
Yeah.
I feel that way. And
Yeah,
so
me too.
I've really enjoyed, like, it takes a long time of like getting things to where they're ready to be shared with the world and stuff. But that's like why I'm excited about this Fuming Mouth album, is like, to me, I listen to it in preparing it and getting mixes ready and whatever. um and I can tell I'm like, this is like my favorite my own instrument has ever sounded. It's like the most connected I've felt to music I've been making in a
Very
long
cool.
time. And I think when you latch onto that, much like you latched onto to music in a time of need, um you know find us in ways and at times when we need them. And
Yeah.
And so, yeah, life, it doesn't get simpler. It gets weirder and harder and more odd. Um, but I think it shouldn't, none of those things should deter us from seeking out the things that get us from moment to moment and day to day. And hopefully we can look back, a year from now and 10 years from now and a lifetime from now um, and realize that we did something productive with our time. We did something
Yeah.
positive with our time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, brought good humans in, brought good humans into this world to help kind of fix it up. I hate to say that, to say to fix it up, but we definitely need it. And it's our youth who are
We
going to
got a
do it
lot. We
for
got a lot
us.
of fixing to do,
We got
man.
a lot of
We got a
fixing to
lot of
do.
humans. Got a lot of fixing humans,
Yeah, they do.
but yeah, all we can do is do our best. Put your best
Yeah,
foot forward, lead with love and positivity and good intention, and we'll see
absolutely.
what happens.
Yeah. Well, 2026, you had talked about it being a crazy year. I know you have Fuming Mouth coming out this year. What else do you have coming? What does the rest of the year look
Let's
like for Mr. Weinberg?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Having a child, that's number one. On the creative front, I've been slowly chipping away at. I shouldn't say slowly because I try to move through it at a pace that I'm comfortable with, which is usually just like all 100% all the time. But I've kind of created this project that is odd in nature because it's music I'm releasing under my own name, but it's by no means like a solo project. Um, in the true sense of it. I approach it because I meet people like on tour all the time, and there's a classic way of like you make a buddy on tour, and you're like, oh, we gotta like start a side project, and sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes that happens, most often not.
Yeah.
But there's something in that. There's something in that, and I've done that. But like
Sure.
there is something in that, like I share respect of what you do, and I feel that you have a respect for the thing that I do, and so there's some kind of interesting, bubbling kind of kinetic energy here. Let's not put the pressure on ourselves of like got a whole thing, a whole band, and then make a record and stuff. We're like, let's make one song together.
Our touring
That's
schedules,
kind of
what
been my
countries
my
we're going
direct.
to.
All of it, yeah, yeah. Being a musician in 2026, like it's
Yeah.
it's not the least complex thing that's ever happened. So,
Yeah.
to make it fun and make it enjoyable, I've been I write all the time, and so with material that I've had for quite a while, that I'm like I don't know what to do with this thing. I don't. It doesn't serve this project. It doesn't you know whatever, like there are other bodies that this doesn't necessarily fit in, so I'm going to hold on to it. I don't know what I want to do with this necessarily, but I'll just save it for a while. That's where I've gotten to with a lot of this stuff, and so now, having harvested lots of skeletons of songs or some fully finished just without like vocals and stuff, I've done a lot of thinking of like who do I want to collaborate with to get this over the finish line in ways that I don't feel like I can bring it over the finish line. Um, so that's resulted in two songs coming out so far. One called Sandstone that I worked with a friend named George Clark from the band Deaf Heaven. That was an amazing experience. In like I brought a song and an arrangement to George, in which I played all the instruments, the drums, the guitar, the bass, the piano, and all that. And I was like, George, I think your voice would be amazing on this. Like, what would you think? And he took on the challenge of like, putting his voice on this thing, and it was perfect. He nailed it in one take.
Wow.
It was a beautiful thing to be a part of, and it gave me like a real creative charge in like taking this on for myself, and kind of like being steering this ship into different ports and pulling up to the port of George Clark to complete this. Like, okay, and then we got that. Now I'm going to pull up to the port of Jamie Morgan and Shade Code Orange in their production capacity as Nowhere to Run, and we made a song called Drone Operator, and I'm really really excited about that. So I won't necessarily say exactly, but I'm trying to get the next song that's pretty much completed out by early July, um, with an amazing duo from Canada who I really, really love their music. And to collaborate with them on a
Mm.
song has been just like a complete dream. A song where there are no drums, very different from
Huh.
any kind of music I've like ever made before. So but it's not made to um this project isn't meant for that. It's not meant for not to say to meet like expectations of things because I really don't care about that. It's This is all just very self-serving and very like it's music that I've just
Yeah.
needed to make
Yeah, you
and
have to do that.
collaborate with people.
You have to do that every
Yeah, you
once in a
got to do
while.
that. Yeah, so I'm gonna be doing that. That's awesome. And throughout this process, I've also been collaborating with a friend of mine, a artistic hero of mine, Paul Romano, who you might know his artwork from Mastodon, The Red Chord, Trivium, and many other bands that he's worked with. And
Amazing.
his
Okay.
artwork as a fine artist. So he's been taking on this project as a collaborative sense of creating a visual character for it. And so that's been really amazing to work with Paul, where all of these songs create all the artwork will create at the end of it will create a rainbow of album covers, which has
That's
been a
so
really
cool.
awesome challenge to embark on with Paul. So we're about 3 songs deep into that, and that'll ultimately culminate into like an actual album. And
Very
so I've been
cool.
really excited working with a lot of people on that. It's been a very communal effort, and like I said, like
Yeah.
another moment, kind of like surrounding myself with like my friends, people that I really respect and appreciate in my life. That's been
Mm.
awesome. I have other projects that I can't divulge anything yet, but that are just in their infancy of like, we've recorded some stuff and it's super cool and I'm really excited about it. Um, and in other ways, like, yeah, and taking on other things like the Fuming Mouth album was just born out of Mark from Fuming Mouth eat cold emailing me. We had never met, and he was like, "Hey, I'm making this record, and we're recording with Kurt Ballou in June, and I I need a drummer, and like, would you want to play drums on it?" And I'm like, "Yes, absolutely, I would love to do that." So really, yeah, just like having a lot of fun and experimenting and being creative and like
Yeah.
um
Now's the
feeling like
best
this,
time for
it's like
you
the
to
most.
do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
why not? Like I love having I feel like the creative experience is so much of like you have an electrical thing and you're searching for outlets and occasionally you feel like you can plug into one. You can derive some creative jolt out of that. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm kind of plugging in all these plugs and all these outlets, and it's been very, very gratifying. And I think
Yeah.
that activity just like begets more and more, and it becomes more and more fun. And I've been enjoying that. So you keep the good times rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Man. Well, Jay, I you are an extremely busy guy, and I appreciate your time and hanging out and talking mental health and rock and roll and family and all the things. You have a very calming presence to you, and I can feel that just through Zoom. So
I
I'm
appreciate
sure
it.
that that's a huge part of your longevity, man. People love you. You're respected. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And the heavy mental audience, I'm sure this is going to be a big one for them and for me as well.
Thanks, man.
So
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.